So I started this thing called Fabric, which is basically it's a small consultancy, and we think of ourselves as shaping behavioral change. Wow, this keeps. Whoa. Okay. Yes. Is it something I'm doing here? Okay. So I'll just jump right into it. This is a company called Peloton. They offer like a huge screen strapped onto some exercise equipment, and they recently made like an 8 or 10 billion IPO, one of the largest IPOs recently. And one of the key things Peloton helps you do is that it helps you exercise at home or in the office, wherever, alone, but it gamifies the exercise experience. It turns it into a social experience. It turns it into a competitive experience. So what was really boring and unmotivating before about trying to work out at home is now something completely different, right? And they're doing really well. Again, this is an interesting startup called Mirror, based out of NYC. And these guys, it's a mirror in when you don't want to use, when you're not using it, and when you turn it on, it basically becomes again a screen which helps you do exercises and also all sorts of workouts. And it's also, I think it's a sort of an interesting new kind of category of product. But what we think of as gamification and, games in real life is not restricted only to play or sport. It's also happening in areas like financial services. In fact, banks are really worried right now about disruption coming from small startups that are nifty and who are thinking about financial services in an entirely new way. For example, Capital is one of them. If you read that text, it's like, ready for a challenge? Money missions are fun challenges that help you think of a bit deeper about your spending. You'll unlock helpful insights into how you use your money now so you can be better in the future. And it kind of goes into this classic dilemma of our age between spending now, saving for later. How do you balance this? And how do you change your behavior related to your spending over a period of time? And how do you do that dynamically? So I think you can just pick up that text there, change the brand, and it could probably fit on a game website. All the keywords are there. Something called geofencing is going on. This is an interesting, and I've not seen enough of it in Finland. I really hope there's more coming everywhere. And I don't really know where it's very popular, but I think this is on the horizon, especially in retail. So a geofence is essentially like a Wi-Fi, a digital perimeter that you can create, and if you kind of walk into this with you, it can recognize your Wi-Fi signal and trigger some sort of an event on your phone. You might be offered, a coupon to buy a free coffee in a mall. You could do all kinds of things. You can use your own imagination, right? So that's like gamification of physical space that's happening to enable new kinds of products and services to be delivered. If you start looking at the driver side of Uber, and Uber leads the way. I'm sure there are other gig economy apps and services, but if you look at the driver side of the app, which you don't really see, it's more and more resembling a game, right from how it begins to how the whole thing is designed in terms of, you kind of get into this experience. If you're a driver, you can set your own rules, you can spend as much time as you like, you can set some sorts of boundaries. It kind of constantly gives you updates on how you're performing against a set of boundaries. And then if you start looking at the language, the terminology, and the design, it starts to look more and more like a game while you're actually trying to earn money. And also on the user side, on the consumer side, you have essentially now what's been rolled out as rewards. And Uber is getting more complex. I'm not the biggest fan of such a complicated reward system, but because they have Uber Eats and they have all sorts of other services and stuff, they're trying to obviously offer rewards at different levels based on your behavior, based on how you use the services, to help you to become or to make you more loyal in terms of the service. Also, if you look at that text over there, unlock benefits at every level that you could pick up and put into a game anywhere. And that's what Uber is becoming. And of course, that's what other ride-sharing services will also try to do in other ways. Electric scooters. If you look at what's happening there, in the case of Bird, one of the leading electric scooter companies based out of San Francisco, I think, you see that they try to use that word bird to kind of evoke the sense of playfulness. Catch a bird, find a bird, release a bird, and juicing e-scooters is like a new gig economy occupation. I'm not sure if you heard of this, but you go around picking up scooters and you charge them and you make money, and that's a job now. That's what the guy on the corner is doing. And if you look at even little small details on the apps that you use every day, if catching a Pokemon is something in time and space, if it's something temporal, if it's a fun activity, why can't going out to go and find that interesting laptop, that interesting lamp, that interesting shoe be a fun activity? And that's what this little nudge here does. That changes everything. There's a big difference when you put that word there, because you immediately communicate to the user that not only is this interesting for you and it's an interesting product, but it's also nearby. You can probably squeeze it in before you go home after work. You can probably go check it out. And that changes the whole dynamics of how you think about acquiring that product there, right? So what I'm trying to get with all these examples is that essentially we had a world when, we've been in the software world for about, popular software is like 30 years old, and we've had the dot-com and then the dot-com bust, and then we had the smartphone showing up in 2007, and the last 10 years or so, the whole landscape of what it means to be a digital product or service, which used to be very far apart from those things called games, these two are starting to converge. And you're starting to see more and more of these things, digital products and services, software, encroach into your domain. And actually those people who design those things are starting to think a lot like how you design your stuff, even though what you make and what you think is very different. But psychologically, it taps into the same drivers. And the interesting question is, and this is an area I don't understand so much, but I'd love to see more games that kind of intercept my real life. I don't want to sit down on a computer. I don't want to detach from my life and get into your game. That's just me, nothing against games. Games are great. I know lots of friends play games. When I play games, I find them to be fun. But I want to read, I want to, fix my finances, I want to socialize, and I want more of what you do in this world. And I think that trend is going to happen as well. And I think as game designers, as people who think about fun and games so much, maybe you should be looking at this as an opportunity and not just live in this world and think of that as the only place where you can do your stuff. And this convergence is really it's in the space of human behavior. What is that holy grail? What is that hallowed ground between these two spaces? It is human behavior, and that's really what I want to talk about today. It seems that we are in an age of attention. The most precious commodity that can possibly be kind of not commoditized, but how do you put it, like that can possibly be offered, that can possibly be valued, is what we actually have, and that's time and attention. And I'm actually trying to tell my clients or people I work with that you should reward users for their attention, because they're giving you something really precious. The amount of time that you have per day is never ever going to change. You only have the fixed 8 hours a day after you remove the 8 hours for sleeping and the 8 hours for hygiene and all the rest. And therefore the human time and attention that you have, the so-called cognitive real estate, as I like to call it, is fixed. But the number of products, services, content, games, apps, movies, name it, so new friends, new organizations, what have you, that are competing for that time and attention, that's only escalating. It's growing exponentially. So what you essentially have is sort of a paradox. It's impossible for us in this narrow window to accommodate this growing amount of stuff. And so therefore your games are effectively competing with everything else. You can say that there is a specific category called entertainment, and people like to entertain themselves, and within that you have games. But this is a broader way to think about it. And if you look at this kind of a paradox, this is where I think thinking about human behavior becomes really important. And to think about human behavior, like Yasmin mentioned earlier, motivation and rewards are at the core. There are several other things that we pull out of behavioral science while thinking about what we call behavior design, or the design of behavior. And I just want to, talk about this kind of difference in motivation, because when we talk about those digital products and services, whether it's Dropbox or Slack or, I don't know, things that help you shop, things that help you, and I mean boring shopping, not fun shopping, I mean shopping for groceries and stuff like that. Software that helps you pay your taxes, software that helps you study, get stuff done, or difficult activities like quitting smoking, stopping difficult habits. All of this hard stuff is what we typically think of as the realm of digital products and services. And all of the motivations here are about, they're all about solving problems. The rewards are all about getting problems solved, and so on. Whereas this world here, I just added slaying dragons and mastering levels there just now, because all of that fun stuff is the world of games and fun, right? And these two worlds, again, like I said, the motivations and rewards traditionally have been different. We have thought of these motivations and rewards to be like this. How do you turn this into something, how do you get this done? And that is like, how do you stay in that happy state? But as I showed you before, these two worlds are converging, and so we need to think very deeply. These guys need to start learning from you guys about how gaming motivation works, and you guys might find new opportunities for your skills, for your ability to create engagement, for your ability to create fun in this problem space, because this problem space desperately needs that, and they are going towards that. You can see plenty of evidence that everything that's boring and that can be made fun will probably be made fun. That's what those guys are working on. That's their whole agenda right now, right? So another example from the boring to the fun world. This is what hotels were selling us, right? They invested a lot, and this is what they sold us. This was really boring. It was secure, but it was really, really boring. It solved a problem, sure, you had a place to live, but people, we want something else, and that's what these guys figured out. And they came up with, have you seen Airbnb experiences? So now Airbnb has a whole company inside it called Airbnb Experiences. What they do is they basically hook you up with local experiences when you travel, and you guys can be anybody can be an experience host. So you can be like a wine tasting guide, or you can be an architectural tour guide, or you can give, I don't know, a yoga class. And essentially through Airbnb you can find these people who give cool experiences, and therefore you're changing the meaning completely of what it travels and what it means to stay somewhere, compared to these guys who were solving that boring problem. These guys went about solving the same problem, find a place to stay with a completely different, what I would argue is a gamified, so-called gamified experience, right? And this is Airbnb Experiences has now a whole thing called Animals, where they have figured out a way to get you to go and see really cool animals. Experiences around animals, and that's tapping into the current crisis and the current situation and our own disconnect from nature, which we all know, which I think is just brilliant, right? So what does all this have to do with behavior? And I just want to jump a little bit out. I hope I tried to make this kind of connection clear between what is traditionally considered boring and what is traditionally considered fun. These things are converging, and they're converging in that space called human behavior. And human behavior is essentially about doing. If I want you to think about human behavior. If you want to think about human behavior, don't think of any other word before you think of the word doing. It's about action. It's not perception, it's not emotion, it's not experience, all of that. Even though all of those things are related to behavior, behavior is about action. Behavioral design moves people into action. It creates a potential space for action. And if you look at this one, this is like a white paper from Google on their website, Think with Google, where they talk about how they're trying to think about the travel experience. And they're trying to break it down into moments. And you have moments of, I want to get away, time to make a plan, let's book it, and can't wait to explore. And the more you think about behavior, you'll see that behavior is very contextual in that world, in this world. These guys think behavior is booking a room, but no, behavior is contextual. It has needs, a little bit like what the previous speaker mentioned. And it's about acting in those moments. And now I want to go a little bit into how behavioral changes actually happen through digital. Are we good so far? Is it good so far? Okay, making sense? Okay, great. I usually do this in the workshop format, so it's interactive, and it's good to just ask questions if you have any questions, because I'm building on a number of concepts, one over the other. So this is like the core of behavior design. I'm just kind of shifting tracks out now and going into behavior design specifically, not specific to games, but just the subject. If you look at what happens in digital behavior design, what we used to call photography before Instagram came along and what we call photography now are two completely different things. What we used to call photography consisted of behaviors, and I said behavior is doing. What did we do? We used to shoot pictures, we would develop the picture, we would display the picture somewhere on a wall or store it in a box, and then we'd kind of, that was what we did, and we called that photography. Now we do something like shooting, editing literally on the fly, sometimes as you shoot using filters or whatever. You share and you start having a conversation, a social dialogue around it, and that's what we call photography. And this has happened without even us knowing it. Yes, we've noticed that we transitioned away from analog cameras to digital cameras, but behaviorally, what we call photography has fundamentally changed in terms of what we do. And you'll see this in every single behavioral, every single digital disruption, any large industry that's been disrupted. What we did before, when we rode cabs, remember that? We used to actually walk to a cab, hail a cab, ride the cab, pay the cab, and that would be the end of it. Now you actually download an app, you map and pick a particular cab, you know who's arriving, you pay up front, you ride the cab, and then you rate it. And you possibly have even a conversation with the driver later. Again, a whole set of new behaviors in cab riding. What we did before digital dating was actually go, and none of these things get completely replaced. I'm not saying that this is now what happens and this doesn't happen anymore, but this is the shift basically. What we did then was to actually meet people in physical spaces, meet, talk, date. Now you kind of set up a profile, you know a lot about the person, before you meet them. You might have a conversation. It's a completely different set of behaviors. And conversational behaviors are starting to be really interesting, and a lot of these companies want us to start behaving differently when it comes to shopping. They want us to behave differently when it comes to socializing, when it comes to managing our health, because they want conversations to drive what we do. And it's going to happen because we are just creatures of convenience. If it's easier to get diagnosed about what you're doing in the middle of a conversation, you're probably going to do it. And shopping used to be about walking to a store, browsing something in an aisle, picking it up, paying and carrying, and I still do this. But then what if you're having a conversation about something and then Alexa says, have you tried this product? That might solve your problem. And you say, sure, order me that. And the product comes home using a drone. So how you shop will radically change. And then health is the other big thing. Health is becoming preemptive. It's not something where you figure out that you have a problem, you schedule a meeting with the doctor, you consult the doctor, and then you go for a medication. You're actually wearing some device right now and you're referring to it constantly, which will give you a heads up in advance that, hey, you might be having this problem or that problem. So health, the way we manage health, the behaviors around health, also totally changing. So what happens is essentially technology and behavior are two sides of the same coin, and one reinforces the other, and the other, comes back to shape this. They shape each other constantly, and that's what's going on. And that's how we should look at technology. That's how we should look at anything digital. As McLuhan said, first we shape our tools, and thereafter they shape us. And so it's very, very important what kind of tools we create, because they will end up changing human behavior. It's almost a guarantee that if you create something that people use, it will change how they behave. It's a consequence you can accept or you can consciously design for. And so pretty much all products, services, devices now in the digital space are all about shaping behavioral change, whether they know it or not. And I have a lot of conversations with as many people as possible in this space, and actually I think it's only the consciousness about this is only starting to become, it's starting to surface now that, oh my God, that's what we are, the business we are in is in the business of shaping human behavior. And how do we do that consciously? What are the tools we have? So behavior design is really about starting to design the behavior before you ever design the technology. And it's very interesting in the world of games, that's a conversation which we need to have, and I'm not the best to kind of comment on that, but it's very interesting to think about what are the behaviors that games shape, and are they restricted to the game world, or do they have any impact on your world outside of the game world, and how do you work with that? So I already mentioned motivation and reward. So what else is part of behavior design? Well, a lot of things. If you get into this, there's so much good research, there's so much interesting stuff from behavioral science, digital psychology, and areas, social science, anthropology. You can add stuff from, not data science, but just a whole bunch of other disciplines. And this is kind of like my toolkit, and I like to kind of present this when I give my courses on behavior design as some of the things that have to be understood. Like Yasmin mentioned, motivation is at the very core of it. Persuasion, understanding cognitive biases, types of personality, the role of emotion, how people make decisions, what triggers us to do the things we do, what are triggers, what's the difference between habits and routines, how do nudges work. Rewards and incentives are super interesting. I work more and more in this area because motivation and rewards are very closely tied. What drives you and what you get out of that action, they are basically functions of the same thing. And then this interesting thing called gamification, making boring stuff fun using game-like mechanics, right? So this world was really chaotic, and I kind of did this for 4 or 5 years. I just kind of read the science, read the literature, and when I saw projects that needed maybe some triggering, I would say, hey guys, do you know that we can actually use this science of triggering in this project? And oh, there's something called nudging from behavioral economics. Let's take that and apply it here. And then I needed more method to this madness, and so I came up with a method. I realized that canvases are super easy to understand. There are so many in the startup world, in the business world. So I said, why not create a behavior design canvas? And that's essentially what I came up with. And this is like a 3-step framework that I've come up with to help teams, think about behavioral change on their projects and actually design for behavior change. I'll take you through the canvas now really quickly, and then we can just open up for questions. It's basically, it has 3 steps, as you can see. All behavioral change initiatives, projects, or experiments have to do with targeting. You can't really go about changing behavior if you don't have a clear target behavior or a goal behavior, as they call it in the science. And the more micro you can get, the better it is. So it could be something like, I like to take the example of getting people to trash, sort their trash. So if you look at mapping the difference from the present to the desired behavior is the first step, and that's what you do in the target phase. People currently don't sort their trash in our apartment. The desired behavior is to get them to sort their trash, and depending on your game, depending on your project, this can get really complex. I mean, to get down to the target behavior, if you're trying to do an organizational change project, or if you're trying to even get your game players to play more, or if you want your players to give you more a specific kind of data, it can be anything. So typically the desired behavior can be supported by your business goal, your revenue model, what's the change you want, and of course the user insight, all of the user research that you have. That's the first step. Target the behavior that you want really carefully. But then it's not so easy. Fine, we want people to sort their trash, but then comes the question of human motivation. Is the user motivated to do the behavior you want to do? I also see this as the ethical piece in my sort of framework, because I don't want to create a framework that ends up giving a tool for people to manipulate others. There is a word for that in UX design. It's called dark patterns, and you can look it up. There's lots of documented dark patterns to get people to do stupid things like sign up or give them your credit card number. We're not into that. We're not into trying to manipulate people. People want to achieve something with your game, with your software. We want to enable them to do that. We want to give them ability and access and agency, basically. So the second part is the human intended, is the human motivated to do your target behavior? You will always find that there is no group that's purely a yes or a no. You'll find people spread between these two. People are always, when it comes to motivation, we're not equal. Even when it comes to walking your dog, or it comes to, I don't know, for example, sorting your trash in your apartment building, you'll have some who say, yeah, the planet is going to shit. I really want to do my bit. Definitely, I'll sort. I'll even sort my neighbor's trash. You have such people. Then you have others who are like, the government should do that. They're like, why should I sort my trash? That's so stupid. I pay my taxes. It should be taken care of by somebody. Lack of motivation, strongly motivated. You need different strategies for these two groups of people in order to get them to do your target behavior. And this applies to games as well. So I think one problem we think of in projects is, even when you think about behavior changes, we tend to treat everybody the same. We think, this is the change we want our players to do, and let's just approach all of them and give them the same sort of, intervention. No, different people take it differently, and this is the most high-level way to split them. Is like, if people already have the motivation, then what they need is ability. They have the motivation, but do they have the ability? So I want to sort my trash, but I don't have the time. I don't have the right box. I don't have the means to sort it. I may be differently abled. I may not be able to carry it out of my apartment. There may be like a whole bunch of reasons why I have the motivation, but I don't have the ability. Find out what is the ability that you can give them to actually make that behavior happen. On the other hand, people who don't have the motivation at all, you can give them all the boxes, you can give them even incentives, they won't do it because they don't have that motivation. What you need to do is change their attitude, you need to persuade them, or you need to gamify things. And this is where that fun gamification part comes into all those boring things. Banking used to be boring, now it's fun. How do you turn saving money and not having that drink, not spending this weekend, into something fun? Really interesting challenge. It's because there's no motivation to do that. There is the need to do that, but there isn't the motivation for that. So that gets split. And then finally, once you have these two strategies broadly, then you can kind of start shaping that behavior. There are many ways to shape behaviors. There's the tiny habits method, build habits incrementally. I just use a very simple, what's called a habit loop. Habit loops are very well studied in psychology. There's lots of research there. There are different kinds of habit loops. I use the most simple one. Essentially, it consists of something called a trigger, which is a cue to action. The smell of coffee can be a trigger. A notification on your phone is a trigger, a car honking is a trigger. It's something that tells you to do an action right now. It's even, triggers can be internal. It's like hunger. It's like, yeah, thinking of your mom. Like, wow, I've not called mom in a long time. Yes, mom, yeah, by the way. And that's a trigger. So the triggers can be emotional, they can be physical. So trigger is something that kind of tells you to do the action now. Then you actually basically do the action, and that action over there is the same as this target behavior. If you've designed this target behavior properly, then you can define a very clear action here, which is measurable. So you say, sort trash, I don't know, 2 times a week. Sort trash on Wednesdays, I don't know, or get them to pick a time. And then tie a reward to the action. Behavioral change does not succeed when you do not provide feedback. And I think game designers know that very well, that if you're getting people to do something that does not elicit feedback, we are not algorithms that can keep doing things without feedback. We need immediate feedback. It should be positive, negative, however that reinforces you, you need feedback. So to create that loop also is an iterative process. You're not going to get any of this right the first time, but it's basically a tool where your entire team can come together and say, what are those behavior changes we need? How do we target them? Is it aligned to the player or the user motivation? How do we kind of make that, how do we shape that behavior? So that's what the canvas is, and it's downloadable. I've put it online. So basically it helps me start conversations, and it's a great tool for anyone to use. And did I have one more? No. That's about it really. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.